You know what's funny about this business? People always want to know about the locks, about the Steiner recliner, about how many guys tapped out and how fast they want to know about the muscle, the promos, the moments where I made an entire arena go quiet just by walking through the curtain. And honestly, I get it. That stuff is real. I earned every bit of it. But when I sit back now and think about what this career actually gave me, it was never the gold. It was never the fear in somebody's eyes. These are the 5 people I keep coming back to, the ones I genuinely loved having beside me. The first person I want to talk about is Buff Bagwell. Now, when people talk about my career, Buff's name barely comes up. And that tells you everything, because Buff was there for almost every important moment I had in the 90s. And he never once asked for credit. When I first started noticing him around the WCW locker room, I thought he was just another guy who cared too much about how he looked and not enough about what actually mattered. Flashy, loud in a different way than me. I didn't take him seriously at first. That was my mistake. What people don't understand is what it cost Buff to stay close to me. When I turned on Rick at Super Brawl and joined the NWO, the locker room split. People made choices about who they stood with. A lot of guys distanced themselves from me because I was unpredictable, because I didn't care about making friends, because I said exactly what I thought, and some people couldn't handle that. Buff stayed, not because it was easy, because that's who he was. I remember being on the road together through 1,998, town after town, long drives between shows. Buff would sit in that passenger seat and we wouldn't even have to talk. He understood that I wasn't built for small conversation. Most people got uncomfortable with that silence. Buff never did. He matched my energy without trying to change it. That's rare. You spend enough years in locker rooms and you realize how rare that actually is. And after WCW ended, when a lot of guys disappeared or reinvented themselves, Buff still showed up. Independent shows, autograph signings, opening day at my restaurant, he was there. No cameras needed, no announcement. When I think about Buff Bagwell today, I think about loyalty. The kind that doesn't need an audience to exist. The next person I want to talk about is Kevin Nash. Most people look at me and Kevin Nash and they see 2 guys who were on opposite sides of some of the biggest angles in WCW history. They see the NWO politics, the title matches, the tag team wars between the Outsiders and my brother and me. They see what the camera showed them. What they don't know is that Kevin Nash and I knew each other before any of that. Before WCW, before the NW, before any of the Monday Night Wars meant anything. We worked out in the same gym in Atlanta when I was still early in my career. We were both from Michigan. That kind of thing builds something before the business gets involved. What people get wrong about Kevin is they think he was casual. They called him lazy. They said he coasted. I watched him from across locker rooms for years, and I never saw a man who didn't understand exactly what he was doing and exactly why. Kevin was sharp. He was calculating in a way that people mistook for indifference. I remember the night before Survivor Series 2002, my return to WWE after years away. I had been out of that environment for a long time and I didn't know what I was walking back into. Kevin called me, not to talk about the storyline, not to ask about the politics or who I was working with. He just called to ask if I was good. That was it. That simple. From somebody I had known since before either of us was anybody in this industry. When I think about Kevin Nash, I think about trust, the kind you build before you have any reason to. Book and I were not friends first. We were opponents, hard ones. In the final stretch at WCW, when the company was visibly dying and everyone in the locker room knew it, Booker and I were the 2 guys still working like the championship meant something. People were showing up and going through the motions. Booker T never did that. I never did that. That's where the respect started. What nobody talks about is the weight both of us were carrying during those months. WCW was collapsing. The talent was frustrated. Creative was a disaster. Paychecks were uncertain. Every week felt like potentially the last week. And in the middle of all that, Booker T walked into that building and prepared like a professional every single time. I noticed that because I was doing the same thing and I was almost alone in doing it. I remember a Nitro taping in 2000 where it was obvious to everyone backstage that we were running out of road. The atmosphere was heavy. Guys were on their phones. People were distracted. Booker T was in the back, stretching, reviewing his match, focused completely on what he was there to do. No conversation about contracts, no drama, just whoop. I watched that and something shifted in how I saw him. When we ended up together in the Main Event Mafia years later in TNA, it felt natural. We had already been through something together that most people never experience. We had both decided to keep working at a high level when nobody was forcing us to. That shared decision made us brothers in a way that titles and factions never could. When I think about Booker T, I think about discipline. The kind that holds when nothing around you is holding. For a long time, Sting and I were everything the other one was not. He was the face of WCW. The guy the company built its identity around for years. The painted face, the trench coat, the crowd response that told you this man meant something to people beyond the ring. And I was doing everything I could to exist on the opposite end of that. I was the muscle, the aggression, the guy who made people uncomfortable on purpose. That was the business. But inside all that contrast, something was always different about the way Sting carried himself toward me. Most guys in his position would have used it. The established face of a company has real influence, the kind that shapes who gets pushed and who gets buried. I have seen men in far smaller positions than Sting use whatever leverage they had to cut off people they viewed as threats. That is how most locker rooms work. You protect your spot, you work the politics, you make sure the right people see you correctly. Sting never did any of that, not once. Even when I was the heel making his life difficult every week on Nitro, even when the narrative was built around me being the thing he had to overcome, he walked into that locker room and treated me the same way he treated everyone else he respected. He never went around me. He never worked the politics against me. He just competed and let the work speak. That consistency is harder to find than people realize. Most people perform respect when the cameras are on. Sting was the same person whether the lights were up or not. The moment I understood what kind of man he was came during a tag team tournament in London. Sting needed a partner. He had easier options. I was told more than one person advised him against choosing me, that I was unpredictable, that it created problems nobody needed. He chose me anyway, and when it was done, he never brought it up again. He never held it over me, never used it as leverage, never referenced it when things became difficult later. He just showed up and worked as though the choice had always been obvious. That is the rarest thing I encountered in 30 years of this business. Someone who extends respect before you have finished earning it. Who doesn't need you standing on the right side of a line to treat you like you belong in the room? I did not make it easy for him. He showed up the same way regardless. When I think about Sting, I think about respect. The kind that doesn't wait for you to deserve it. And the last person I truly loved the most was Rick Steiner. I know people expect me to say that. He is my brother. Of course I say Rick. But I need you to understand something. This is not a simple story. This is not two brothers who go through hard times and everything works out. What Rick and I had was more complicated than that, more painful, and more honest than anything else I experienced in 30 years of this business. When I turned on Rick at Super Brawl 8 in 1998 when I hit him and handed those tag titles to the Outsiders, I knew exactly what I was doing. The business decision made sense to me at the time. I was ready to be something bigger than a tag team. What I did not let myself think about was what it cost him. Rick had been offered a spot in the NWO more than once. He said no every time. Not because he was difficult, because he did not want the Steiner brothers' name attached to something that would change what it meant. He was standing guard over what we had built together for almost a decade. I walked away anyway. What Rick never did was make me carry it publicly. He did not go to interviews and talk about betrayal. He did not work the locker room against me. He came back every night and competed. He feuded with me the way a real professional feuds, gave everything inside that ring and left everything else alone when the bell rang. No score settling outside the ropes. That kind of dignity is something I have thought about for a long time, since the older I get, the more clearly I understand the weight he was carrying. Not just the physical demands, the other weight, the weight of being Rick Steiner, when every interviewer, every fan, every person with a microphone wanted to ask the same question: how did it feel when your own brother turned on you in front of everybody? He answered every time. He never dodged it, and he never made the answer about making me look worse than I already looked. Honest, measured, then he moved on. I watched that happen from a distance, and I never forgot it. That was never my way. I was loud. I put everything on the outside where people could see it. Rick kept everything inside, processed it quietly, and came back the next week ready to work. There was one night after a house show in late 1998, both of us still deep in that feud, when I saw him in the parking lot loading his bag into his car alone. No entourage, no drama, just Rick. Same as always. I thought about everything he had quietly absorbed that year without once asking me to acknowledge it. That image stayed with me longer than any match we had together. He did not need me to thank him. He did not need an apology in front of cameras. He just needed me to keep walking out there and being Scott Steiner at the highest level I could. Because that is all he ever wanted from me. When I think about Rick Steiner, I think about sacrifice. And I think about the kind of love that never once asked for anything back. The older I get, the more I realize what actually disappears and what actually stays. The headlines disappear. The feuds that felt like the most important thing in the world, they fade. You spend months building toward a pay-per-view, everything pointing at one night, one match, one finish, and then it is over and the next thing starts and what you just did recedes. Title reigns blur eventually. I held championships. I would have done anything to win. And now when I try to remember specific nights and specific arenas, I have to work at it. The details slip. The records people argued about endlessly, those arguments end too. Nobody's still having the same conversation they were having in 1999. Even the crowds disappear in a way. Those enormous crowds, the ones where the noise hits you physically when you walk through that curtain, the sound of them fades. You stop being able to recreate exactly what it felt like to hear that many people at once. You remember it was loud. You remember the shape of the feeling. But the feeling itself becomes something you are describing rather than something you are inside of. That distance grows the longer you are away from it. What does not disappear is the faces, not the moments themselves, the people who were present inside those moments, the conversations that happened in the back before the show when nobody was watching, the way certain men carried themselves when things got difficult and no cameras were pointed at them, the ones who were already in the building when you arrived and still picked up the phone years after everything ended. Buff was there in the quiet. Kevin was there before any of it started. Booker was there when everything was coming apart and chose to keep working anyway. Sting was there on the other side of the line and treated me the same regardless. Rick was there carrying something he never once asked me to acknowledge. None of that fades. None of it blurs the way the championships blur. It stays sharp because it was the only part of all this that was entirely real from the very beginning. That is why these 5 names mean something different to me than any title I ever held. The gold was something I won. These people were something I was given. And I did not understand the difference until it was already years behind me. Buff Bagwell brought loyalty, the kind that costs something and keeps going anyway. Kevin Nash brought trust that was real before the business gave us any reason to trust each other. Booker T brought discipline that held steady when everything around us was falling apart. Sting brought respect that never needed me to be on the right side of the line to be real. And Rick Steiner brought sacrifice, quiet, consistent, and never once asking for recognition. What made those years mean something was not the belts. It was not the ratings or the crowds or the moments people still talk about online. It was those 5 people choosing to show up. Choosing to be real in a business that rewards performance and punishes honesty. People always ask me about the Steiner recliner, about the locks, the muscle, the fear. And sure, all of that is part of who I am, but the strongest thing I ever had was never something you could measure in the weight room. You can become Big Papa Pump alone, but you cannot become Scott Steiner without people like these beside you.